10 years of build-up for this, and the wait was pretty worth it. Let's go over how to take down the witness in Salvation's Edge. Before we begin, note that normal mode raids now have surges attached to them, and you should try to match your damage with that of the surges to make the raid easier. The first encounter is a non-boss encounter to teach you about the resonance mechanic. The goal here is to pour as much resonance into a chest in the middle of the room to unlock the exit. Team composition should focus on ad clear builds, as this entire encounter is purely about killing things as fast as possible so that others on the team can progress. You will want weapons that are good at killing tormentors and subjugators, bring some amount of precision damage, and or divinity if you think you need it. Hunter Golden Guns and Nighthawks, in addition to the Still Hunt Sniper, have been amazing for the entire raid. Burst supers work great, but also roaming supers work for other parts of the encounter. In terms of weaponry, bring your best ad-clearing weapons. Kvostov was doing some serious work in this place as a new example. To start the fight, you'll want to split your group into 2 teams of 3. Call them whatever you want, but Team 1 will always go through the left side doorway and Team 2 will always go to the right, and I will explain what that means. When the encounter starts, 2 of the doors in the main room that you're in will open, and some supplicant harpies will fly out of these newly accessible rooms. The rooms will always be right next to each other, left and right, although maybe not that directly, like one door might be at floor level and then another one's downstairs or up high on a ledge or something like that. Either way, make your way into these rooms and start slaying out and progressing in the direction of your team's main direction. So left team is going to keep going left, right team keeps going right. Eventually, you won't be able to progress until the opposite team kills a Hydra called Keeper of the Monolith, which stops the next door from opening. Be aware that the nearest Hydra may be behind you if you're wondering why nothing is happening. Eventually, after a couple of rooms, you will encounter an Overload Minotaur. Killing this Minotaur triggers a Tormentor in the main room and will despawn any other Overload Minotaurs. Don't worry about the despawn, it's just the first one to die that actually matters. The doors to the center will open, and everyone should go to the center because 2 new doors will open later, left and right, and you should go into these rooms to continue the process. You'll do the same thing: Hydras, Minotaurs, Tormentor spawn, the whole thing. After the second Tormentor is when the main mechanic takes place. Go back to the rooms you came from after the doors open for the second time. In 2 of the rooms, you will have 1 plate that is glowing, ready to be activated, and another room with a conductor totem that has been opened up. It looks like this. The goal here is to step on the plates to ping pong a charge back and forth between the 2 plates to spawn resonance, to then pick that up and then place in the center room after both conductors have been fully activated. I just said a lot of things, so let's break that down. Also, my team called them conduits, so if you ever hear me use the word conduit versus conductor, I'm talking about the same thing. First, the ping pong plates. Stepping on the active plate will activate it and send a charge down a path to another plate. This plate will be in the room with the active conductor. The player watching this second plate must wait for the charge from the wire to enter the plate. When it enters and lights up, that's when you can step on it. The charge goes back to the first plate and you do the same thing. Step on the plate when it lights up and you bounce this charge back and forth. The timing window is pretty small, only a couple of seconds. If you mess up the very first bounce, nothing happens. But if you mess up at any other point, the plates will deactivate and a subjugator spawns, and you must kill the subjugator before they will activate again. Now let's talk resonance. Resonance will come in the form of a 3D shape type pickup on the ground somewhere in the rooms with the ping pong plates. As you charge the plates over and over, more of this resonance will spawn in the room. You can hold a maximum of 3 resonance, pick up any more and you will die instantly. The plate players need to be scooping resonance in between plate activations. Note that the third player in each team, the one not doing the plates, should help with ad clear and should also go to the center room to pick up resonance, as some will spawn there as well. As soon as both players have 3 stacks of resonance, it's time to power the conductor. This conductor can be activated technically at any time, but doing so will remove 1 stack of resonance, not that big of a deal, but will despawn all other resonance attached to that conductor that have not been picked up. So you only want to activate the conductor when you're truly ready or truly desperate. To bring the conductor to life, all you need to do is shoot it a couple of times and then finish a plate cycle on the plate that is in the same room as the conductor. So, in this example, I send the charge back to the previous room, I pick up 3 resonance, shoot the conductor, and then hit my plate again, which charges the conductor. If you shoot the conductor after stepping on your plate, you will need to wait a full cycle before the conductor is fully charged. Do not leave early, wait for the activation and sound cue. It'll be very obvious when you've done it right. Something to note is that conductors have a little 3D object in the middle where you need to shoot. In this first stage, it's literally impossible to mess it up, but to finish charging the conductor, the person who steps on the final plate must have a resonance shape that matches the object in the middle of the conductor. So, I have pyramidal resonance, I see pyramid in the conductor, I step on the plate, we're good. If I had a different shape and I shot and then stepped on the plate, I would die and it wouldn't charge. Not super important for now, but it'll get more important later on. Anyway, after both teams do that successfully, you will have a subjugator spawn in the and it's dead. At this point, you'll wait around for a chest in the middle of the room to spawn so that you can deposit your resonance to build the timer back at the top of the screen. I should probably mention that you only have so much time to do 1 cycle of this encounter. That'll be a running theme in the entire raid. Be aware of the pyramid-shaped AoE that the witness will constantly be placing around the room. It doesn't do anything right now but damage you, but that's foreshadowing for what's to come. As long as everyone has 2 or 3 resonance, you should be able to build your timer back up to the maximum amount of time that this encounter allows, and you just repeat this process 2 more times to complete the fight. The Herald of Finality is encounter number 2, which takes a lot of the components from the previous encounter and integrates them into an actual boss encounter. Team composition can remain mostly the same as the first, but it'll be helpful to have some healing during the damage phase, like a Well of Radiance, yes, even the nerfed version, in addition to something like Sever to reduce the amount of damage the boss will do to you, as this boss is quite mobile and aggressive. That being said, my team used swords for this encounter. Other teams have used Acreus as well, but swords are quite simple to use, although Episode 1's artifact is quite sword heavy in its perks. The new Ergo Sum sword with Wolfpack rounds, which yes, is a real thing, should be used as well if your team has one. After the artifact is gone, you'll probably rotate over to the Lament or Legend of Acreus if you haven't done so already, although you could probably do any popular damage strategy with a Well of Radiance somewhere. Any sort of power ammo generators should be utilized as well here, Aeons, Cenotaph, you'll get some use out of them. I actually ended up using Heart Shadow for a time as a way to weaken the boss while still being able to deal decent sword damage. You could also use Tractor Cannon to debuff, that's fine too, and Burst Supers are going to be very good. The goal here is actually quite similar to the first encounter. Charge 3 conductors to spawn a chest in the arena to dump your resonance into, so you can buy more time in the encounter to kill the boss. How you do it is also quite similar, bouncing charges between the plates. But there's a little more added on this time. Split your team into groups of 2, left, middle, and right. I will say that the right side is the easiest side, the middle is the next hardest, and the left side the most difficult, so assign people accordingly. The reason the sides are more difficult is because they aren't all physically the same. The left side has considerably more platforming to deal with, which can make getting resonance much harder. We'll get to that soon. The fight starts by shooting the Blight in the middle of the room. Each of the 3 sides will get a couple of waves of enemies to kill, a knight and some attendants, aka the stasis dudes, followed by another wave of them in addition to an ogre if you're on the right side, a phalanx in the middle, and a wizard on the left. These are your Aeons and Cenotaph targets, by the way. Shortly after, 3 people, typically 1 from each side, in fact I think that's every time, will be called to battle, aka Call of Reckoning. The way this works is that these 3 players must enter the square arena with the boss in it and shoot him in the head a lot. Blights will spawn around the room which need to be destroyed, otherwise you can't damage the boss. They'll either be in the middle arena or up high on the left and right sides. I think stepping out of the arena after stepping into it will cause delays in finishing this part of the encounter. So if you do enter, do not leave until it is complete. On normal mode, staying alive isn't a big deal, but people should have a healing grenade ready or even the new healing auto rifle, which I think is really good and fun to use. After doing enough damage, you'll hear a ringing noise signaling that you are done, and your buff will change to Stolen Favor. The other half of the fight is more ping-ponging of plates, collecting resonance, the same deal as the first encounter. However, this time, shooting the conductor with the right symbol actually matters. Remember that shape that we saw in the conductor in the first encounter? Well, now you can only see that shape if you have Stolen Favor, so teams need to call out what shape is in the conductor to make sure you finish the plate sequence with the right resonance, because now there's 2 shapes, spheres and pyramids. You can pick up any combination of resonance, but the limit is still 3. So if you pick up a sphere first, you're going to have sphere X1. Then if you grab a pyramid, your resonance will switch to pyramid, but now you're at X2. So if you're in charge of shooting the conductor, you need to ensure that the final resonance you pick up is the one that matches the conductor, and that the person who steps on the plate to charge the conductor also needs to have the same resonance as the conductor. One kind of resonance will spawn on one side in your respective area, and then the other on the other. Remember that locking your conductor despawns all resonance, so you can't just lock right away and then go get it later. In fact, you're going to do the opposite, which I'll talk about in a moment. There are 2 different ways of handling this encounter. Call of Reckoning first and plates second, or plates first and Call of Reckoning second. Some teams prefer one way, other teams might prefer another. Just pick one that works for you. I think some teams have maybe been skewing more towards plates first, but I'm not really too sure. The footage that I have is of plates second before I've really gotten to refine the plates first strategy. An easier way to handle picking up resonance is to intentionally fail stepping on the plate after spawning a bunch of resonance. The resonance doesn't disappear on a failure, only after charging the totem. The penalty for failure is that a slightly tougher enemy spawns, but it's a small price to pay for being able to have a bunch more time to pick up resonance, especially on the left side, which has a ton of platforming. So you ping pong a few times, spawn a bunch of resonance, intentionally fail, kill the enemy that spawns, then both players scoop resonance, reactivate the plate, and fully charge the conductor. If you do plates first, you will need to get Stolen Favor before you can complete the final step of that sequence. I don't intentionally fail in the footage that you're watching. Do as I say, not as I do. Part of the difficulty here is dealing with the attendants that spawn in. They are the most deceiving enemy in the final shape because while they look like scions, they can absolutely destroy you if left alone. They deal a ton of damage. They also spawn in different configurations, 2 and 2, all 4 of them, spawning on left, spawning on the stairs, spawning on the right. They're all over the place. That, and they're throwing stasis AoE at you, which slows you, which can prevent you from getting to the plate on time. Take them seriously. A wave frame grenade launcher did wonders for me on day 1 in contest mode because it killed them in one shot. It should also be doing the same here. Other than that, it's the same. Ping pong the plates, create resonance, charge the conductor. Once you have both parts of the encounter done, and every side has them all done, head to the main stage, and in the back will be a chest to dump your resonance in to buy some time. Just be careful putting in the resonance. There's a damaging AoE right next to the chest, and you will just die to that if you're waiting around not paying attention. Also, try to let the buffers and the debuffers dunk first so that they can set up wells and wards and tractor cannon and whatever else they gotta do. Then you just wail on the boss with swords or Acreus or whatever you're using. Drop a well, hit the boss with Sever if you want, and go nuts. Something that I haven't tested but might be pretty neat is the new Warlock helmet that makes a healing turret out of a healing grenade, but I think you'd probably just have Well of Radiance at that point, so I don't know. Either way, if you dunked enough resonance, you should fully reset your timer, and you just repeat this process 2 more times until you kill the boss or the boss kills you. It's actually a pretty straightforward fight. It's mainly the execution of it that is the hard part, making sure you stack enough resonance, the right people shooting the right conductors, all that kind of stuff. Final stand shouldn't be a big deal as long as you have some amount of ammo to your name. The arena will spawn the 3 big enemies you've been dealing with, but they shouldn't be a hassle. Just burn the boss and you should be fine. It's pretty forgiving. Encounter 3 is kind of a gimme encounter. It continues to use the plate mechanic, but now adds a 3rd plate and a 3rd resonance shape. Team composition should be focused on slaying adds, similar to Encounter 1. You will also have many Tormentors to deal with and potentially Subjugators as well, so anything to easily deal with those enemies will also be quite helpful. Precision damage, divinity, whatever. The goal here is the same as Encounter 1. Dump resonance into the chest in the middle to buy time to complete the encounter. It's just that you're now dealing with a 3rd shape and the difficulties of everyone trying to manage their own plates and resonance. The fight starts with 3 Tormentors and a lot of adds. Try to focus fire each Tormentor down 1 at a time as a team instead of splitting into different groups, unless you happen to have a lot of Nighthawk Hunters to just insta-gib all of the Tormentors. Whoever gets the final blow on the Tormentor gets the Stolen Favor buff, and the buff works the exact same as the previous encounter. Only people with Stolen Favor can see the shape of the resonance you need to activate the conductor, so be sure to call that out, type it out, whatever you gotta do. After all of the Tormentors go down, Cabal turrets will spawn on high up platforms, kill them immediately, then it's time to go back to plates for more ping pong. In this first room, things are not too complicated. Teams should start pinging their plates and collecting resonance as they're able to. The use of an intentional failure of the plate, like in the previous encounter, is likely something you will want to explore, and that's mainly because resonance doesn't spawn very cleanly in the arena. Players will have to roam around to find the resonance they need, and eventually you will need to travel far enough away from your plate that it'll be basically impossible to get back in time to keep the plates active. On normal mode, the Subjugators are not that big of a threat, so feel free to just intentionally fail and go get resonance. After everyone gathers their resonance, whether it's to activate a conductor or just to have 3 to dunk into the chest, reactivate the plates and charge the conductors. Ideally, you will have 3 people assigned to the back of the room, left, middle, and right, and then 3 people assigned up front. The people up front should also be ideally the ones killing the Tormentors so that they can see where the proper resonance conductors are for the resonance that they are collecting. This is a very flexible encounter, so however you want to arrange people is totally fine. The only thing to remember is that once you light a conductor, once it's charged up, it will despawn all of the resonance that it was creating, which is why the intentional failure is kind of important. After charging all 3, more turrets are going to show up, in addition to the chest to deposit resonance. Finally, you'll have an unstoppable champion spawn in somewhat near the door. It needs to be killed to proceed to the next stage of the fight. The next 2 stages play the exact same way, except you're in different rooms and the pathing of the plates gets a little mixed up. In the first room, the path the back left plate took to get to its connected plate stayed on the left, middle stayed in the middle, and then right stayed on the right. In the second room, the right stays on the right, but the left side plate ends in the middle, and the middle plate ends up on the left. Assign people however you want up front, but ideally the people in the back stay on the same plates just to create some consistency in the encounter. The third room is the same deal, except now the left plate goes to the middle goes to the right, and the right goes to the left. Otherwise, it plays out the exact same way. Get resonance, charge the conductors, you know the drill. Complete all 3 stages to move to Encounter 4, which has completely different mechanics to the rest of the raid. Encounter 4, aka Verity, is basically the Vault 2.0, the Vault encounter from Last Wish. It is mostly a puzzle fight with not a lot of significant combat outside of some unstoppable ogres. Therefore, your loadout nor your team composition does not really matter that much. But what is important is your fashion and your ghost shell selection. I know that sounds like parody, but it's very true for reasons I'll explain. Also, much like the vault in Last Wish, this encounter is going to be somewhat confusing, arguably even more confusing to some than the vault, so I'll do my best to explain it. This fight has your team broken up into 2 different groups. Group 1 consists of 3 players, each placed in their own rooms, which I'm calling the Shadow Realm, and then the remaining 3 players, all in the same room together, which I'm calling the Normal Realm, trying to bring the Shadow Realm players back. For the players in the Shadow Realm, aka the solos, your job is to prepare yourself and your other trapped teammates by coordinating shapes. Let's talk about the layout of the room. When you spawn in, you'll see every player in the team as a statue. This will be important for a later part of the fight. Then, progressing forward, you'll see 3 more statues, also of your characters. On the front wall, you'll see a rotating cycle of shapes: triangle, circle, square. The room is the same for everyone regardless of what team you're on, except if you're in the Shadow Realm, the first half of the room, the spawn side, will be blocked off by a glass wall until you are freed. Let's talk Shadow Realm first. The 3 players teleported to the Shadow Realm will each have a statue of themselves, along with them holding some kind of a shape: triangle, circle, or square. A callout must be made saying which shapes are being held where, so that the normal team can do what they need to start doing. So if the shapes are triangle left, circle middle, and square right, you'd relay that information to the team, or just say TCS or something like that. The main mechanic of this encounter in the normal realm is Dissect, where players must reshape 3D objects in a specific way to bring their teammates back from the Shadow Realm. My team used a strategy that does require an extra step, but helps with the coordination for this next part, as it can be very easy to mess up. The best way to explain this encounter is by using an example and a chart and some very poorly animated Photoshop, so let's do just that. Players 1, 2, and 3 enter the Shadow Realm. Player 1 is on the left, they have a triangle in their hand. Player 2 is middle with a circle, player 3 is on the right with a square. On the wall in front of each player will have 2 shadows flashing of certain shapes. These are the shapes currently in their possession. Let's say player number 1 has a triangle and a circle, player 2 has a circle and a square, and 3 has a square and a triangle. The first step, which is not actually required but has helped smooth out the process, is to give everyone the shape that they are holding. The triangle player should get all the triangles, the circle player gets all the circles, you get it. So, how do you do that? By killing the knights. When killed, knights will drop a shape that is currently in your possession, aka the shadow symbols on the wall in front of you. So in our example, the triangle player kills a knight, and the knight can drop either a triangle or a circle. Let's say it drops the triangle, you would just ignore that for now. You kill another knight, and there's your circle. You pass the circle to the circle player by picking it up, just stand next to it and pick it up with your interact button, and then run over to the statue of the player who holds the circle and interact with the statue. Congrats, you have just now passed the circle to the circle player. It's going to show up on their wall, and it'll be removed from your wall. All other players in the Shadow Realm should do the same for their respective shapes. Circle gets all the circles, square gets all the squares. Once all players have their own shapes, part 2 begins. Remember that this is just an extra step to get organized, and that you don't actually need to do it, but for some people it really helps to stay organized. It's also very possible to get really good RNG, and all players simply have their own symbols from the get-go, no work needed, but that's pretty rare and you shouldn't rely on it happening. Also, if you ever happen to pick up the wrong shape, that's okay. Just pick up another shape and deposit it somewhere. It'll get rid of both shapes. This applies everywhere in the encounter to all players. Once all players have their own shapes in the Shadow Realm, it's time to give them away, because what you actually want to progress the fight are the opposite symbols of what your statue says. For example, the triangle player wants a circle and a square, the circle player wants a triangle and a square, and the square player wants a triangle and a circle. So now that each player has 2 of their own shapes, we give them away. Kill a knight, pick up the shape, assuming it's the one that your statue is holding, which the first one should be, and give it to a player. Then kill another knight, pick up the shape that you're holding, give that one to another player. When that's done successfully, all 3 players in the Shadow Realm should have 2 shapes, but neither of them will be the one that your statue is holding. Note that you will get an ogre to spawn in between knight kills. The ogre is just an annoying enemy that's going to kill you, so kill it quickly to continue knight spawns. At some point during this process, usually around the timing of people getting the shapes that they need, the witness will kill everyone in the Shadow Realm. But this is not a true death. This is a mechanic-driven death and is supposed to happen. You'll be frozen in place and must spectate the people in the normal realm. The people in the normal realm have to pick up the dead player's ghosts and put them back in the statues in the spawn area of the room. This is why your ghost is important. Everyone needs to say what their ghost looks like, so that way people know who has what ghost so they can be revived. Note that you can get around having to know this information by having players in the Shadow Realm identify where in the room they are choosing to die and then just connect their ghost to their positioning. If someone says that they died on the left side, well, you don't need to know their ghost because you know their positioning. But the ghost stuff is a bit more fun. Normal realm players pick up the ghosts and head back to the statues, but the statues that you need to use are empty. They can't see which player is actually there, but the dead players can see one person via spectate. This is why your fashion is important. The dead players need to call out which player is at which statue location so that their ghost can be placed in the correct spot. Call out yellow glowing guardians, solid ones are already complete. Therefore, having a unique fashion will help you stand out and make you easier to identify. Everyone should get a good look at each other before the fight starts to make this process easier. After callouts are made and players are revived, you can continue the fight. Now back to the Shadow Realm people. You might now have 2 shapes on your wall that should hopefully be not the ones that your statue is holding. If not, then get to that point. After that's done, you need to kill 2 knights and pick up both of the shapes that they drop, resulting in a buff named according to which 2 shapes you've picked up. After you do this, your fate rests with that of the players in the normal realm. Once the normal realm does what they need to do, you'll be able to walk through the glass wall in the middle of the room and rejoin your team. So, what insanity awaits the normal realm players? The Shadow Realm players mainly deal with 2-dimensional shapes: triangle, circle, square. The normal realm players will be dealing with 3-dimensional shapes: cone, cylinder, triangular prism, which I'll be referring to as prism for the rest of the guide, sphere, pyramid, and cube. I've been calling the 2-dimensional items shapes, and I'll call the 3-dimensional items objects, so that I'm not calling everything a shape or a symbol. We can keep the terminology. The goal of the normal realm team is to shape a 3D object on each of the 3 guardian statues that consists of components opposite of that of their statues in the Shadow Realm. That sounds like an insane statement. Let's break it down with another example. The first thing you'll want to know is how each 3D object is formed. A sphere in a statue's hands means that the statue contains 2 circles. A cube is 2 squares, a pyramid is 2 triangles. These are easier to remember, but they are also much more annoying to deal with. A cylinder is a square and a circle, or CS. A prism is a triangle and a square, or TS or ST, however you want to organize it. And a cone is a triangle and a circle, or TC or CT. Let's use the same callouts from earlier. Triangles left, circles middle, squares right. The Shadow Realm says TCS for triangle left, circle middle, square right. It is now the goal of the normal realm to create 3D shapes in the left, middle, and right statues that do not contain the shape of the statue in that particular position. So, if triangle is on the left in the Shadow Realm, the shape that the normal realm eventually wants to have needs to not contain a triangle, but should also not contain 2 of the same shape. The only shape that hits those requirements is a cylinder, because a cylinder consists of a square and a circle. We then follow this pattern for the other 2 statues. The middle is a circle, so we want a shape that does not contain a circle nor two of the same shape. That means we need a prism, which is a triangle and a square. The right statue is a square. We want a shape with no squares nor two of the same shape, so that means we need a cone, which is a circle and a triangle. Great, so we now know what we need. How do we actually do that? When you start the encounter, each statue will be holding a random 3D object. Most of the time, it will take 4 statue interactions to create the proper swaps, aka 2 dissections. But if you get unlucky and have a sphere, pyramid, and a cube, it's going to take 3, but I'll break that scenario down in a moment. How does dissect work? Dissect works by killing a knight, just like in the Shadow Realm, and the knight will drop a 2D shape. In the normal realm, the left knight will always drop a circle, the middle a triangle, and the right a square. You start the dissect process by grabbing a 2D shape and placing it into a statue that has that shape as part of the 3D object it is holding. You then grab a different shape and place it into a different statue with the same conditions. If those conditions are met, the 2 statues will swap the 2D shapes that you placed into them, changing the 3D objects they were holding to match the new shapes they now contain. If you ever pick up the wrong shape on accident, again, don't worry, simply pick up another shape, creating a 3D object, and place it into a statue. It'll remove the object from you, but it won't alter the statues at all. So let's give an example. Statue 1 is holding a cone, aka triangle and circle, aka TC. Statue 2 is holding a prism, aka triangle and square, aka TS. Statue 3 is holding a cylinder, aka circle and square, aka CS. If I pick up a circle from a knight, I can place it in statue 1 or statue 3. Statue 2 literally will not let me, as there is no circle in the prism object to trade. I'll place it in statue 1. Then I'll grab a triangle and place it into statue 2 because statue 3's object has no triangles in it, and I can't place 2 shapes into the same statue at the same time. Once I place the triangle into statue 2, the 2 statues make a trade. Statue 1 gets the triangle from 2, and statue 2 gets the circle from 1. This will change the 3D objects based on the shapes the statues now hold. The original statue 1 had a cone, which was a triangle and a circle. Original 2 had a prism, which was a triangle and a square. We gave statue 2 a circle and removed the triangle, which means we now have a circle and a square, which creates a cylinder. We gave statue 1 a triangle and removed the circle, which means we now have a triangle and another triangle, making a pyramid. You have completed a dissection. Now, that was a random one, but it was just an example. So, let's get back to the actual fight. This time, we're going to use an example from real gameplay. Ignore me jumping into the hole at the start. I was intentionally trying to be placed in the normal realm so that I could get footage of this. In this real-world example, the call-out is triangle, circle, square, TCS. So, I need to eventually make a cylinder in the left, because it doesn't contain a triangle, a prism in the middle, because it doesn't contain a circle, and a cone on the right, because it doesn't contain a square. Great, I know where I need to go, I just need to do the mechanics now. So we can start anywhere we want. The first shape I see is a circle, so I decide to run with it. We know that statue 2 is the circle statue, and therefore we want to have a 3D object that contains no circles in it in that statue. So I place the circle into statue 2, priming it to trade with another statue. The statue currently contains a cone, which is triangle circle. I'm removing the circle, so then it'll just be a triangle. And so now I want to add a square to it to make the object that I actually need. I see a square that a knight dropped, so I pick it up and see that statue 3's 3D object contains a square. So I drop the square into statue 3. Circle and square trade, statue 2 is ready to go. Statue 1 and 3 still need some work, but it's only going to take one more trade to fix them. There's a quick interruption as the witness tries to final shape my friends, but we fix that and move on to the second dissection. So, we know that statue 2 is correct, which means we only need to interact with statues 1 and 3. I know that we still have a triangle in statue 1, which we need to get rid of, and we have 2 circles in statue 3 because we have a sphere, one of which needs to be purged. I grab a triangle and I dump it in statue 1, I grab a circle and I dump it in statue 3, and we get the nice sound effect that tells us we did it correctly. Simple as that. Now, most of the solves can be done in 2 dissections. However, what about when it requires more? The only time this will ever happen is if you end up with a pyramid, a sphere, and a cube all at the same time. In this case, we simply want to make a dissection happen to get us to the state where we need 2 dissections so that we can use our logic to solve the puzzle, which is just a really weird way of saying we need to do 3 instead of 2 dissections. In this example, I have sphere left, cube middle, and pyramid right. The statues in the shadow realm read CST, circle, square, triangle. Okay, I know that I need to remove all circles from statue 1, all squares from 2, and all triangles from 3. Each statue contains 2, which means we need to make 3 swaps because math. We start with a dissect of circle on left and square in middle to get us to a 2-solve state. Our objects are now cylinder, cylinder, pyramid. Now we can just use the logic from the 2-solve state to finish it out. I know I don't want circles on the left, so our next target is a circle on the left. I know I still want to remove triangles from the right, so I drop a triangle on the right, making for dissect number 2 complete. Statue 1 is now correct, 2 and 3 are not. They need to be swapped next. We still have a square to purge from middle since our current middle is a cylinder, so I grab a square for statue 2, and we need to trade it for a triangle, which the right side statue has. I dump a triangle into the right side statue. That's our final swap complete, and my team is clear to enter. Now that everyone has regrouped, we have one more part to complete. Shortly after the regrouping, unstoppable ogres will spawn. A few more enemies will spawn after that, just get rid of them. Then the witness will kill 5 players. Before that happens, everyone should spread out a little bit. Do not stack up. The only alive player needs to pick up someone's ghost and put it into the correct statue. Only the dead can see which player goes where, and you can only see one person. So start making callouts for what ghost goes where. Everyone needs to make some kind of a call here because you only have 1 minute to do this, otherwise it's a wipe. This is not the time to let other people do callouts. Also, the only person left alive should wait to pick up a ghost until you know the position of that player. Do not just pick up someone's ghost and then ask where it goes. I think that is the best I can possibly explain this fight. It's a bit overwhelming to hear, but once you get the logic down for the normal realm, you can do it incredibly quickly and it actually becomes somewhat routine. Note that most teams are probably just going to end up having 1 or 2 people doing the entire thing in a given rotation of the encounter, but feel free to make callouts as you see fit to have other players help out. All it takes is a callout. Hey, somebody grab triangle and put it in the right side statue. Something like that. Multiple people need to know the normal realm role, while everyone needs to know what to do in the shadow realm, since anyone can be teleported there at any time. If anyone dies in the shadow realm, they are replaced, which might cause some confusion, so the person that died should bring the new player up to speed. Repeat this process 2 more times to move on to the final encounter, the Witness. The Witness is where everything comes together while also introducing even more mechanics on top, including a wild damage phase. Team composition should bring some sort of a damage buff like Well or Ward, but Well will probably be better so you can heal up in between any potential damage taken. You will want to bring some kind of a precision weapon for damage or whatever the damage strategy will evolve into. Currently, Still Hunt is being used by Nighthawk Hunters as they absolutely crush damage meters, while others are bringing things like Doomed Petitioner from last season or other linear fusions as the damage phase is quite mobile, so being able to stop and start again will be very important. The raid exotic Euphony during Strand Surge was doing really good damage. Still not quite Nighthawk Still Hunt levels, but still really good. Even Microcosm, the kinetic heavy trace, was apparently cooking the Witness. Ultimately, what you use will depend on the active surge though. Having good ad clear on this encounter will also be very nice, as Screebs will be everywhere, Weavers will be pulling you left and right, and Chieftains will make everything immune with totems. I used Commemoration and a solid primary, and it worked out just fine. Lucky Pants were disabled for the raid race, but those are back, and I imagine they're going to be pretty solid here too. Also, Titans, yeah, just throw on some Aeons and special ammo finishers and be an ammo bot for your team. Throw on Prismatic and just have some fun out there, alright? The goal of the Witness encounter is to remove the 6 buttons off of his shirt via the Glyph Breaker buff so that he gets so embarrassed that he just leaves. The first thing you'll notice in this encounter is that it's just pure insanity going on around you with no real clear path of where to start. Assign 3 people to be Glyph Breakers. They're going to be the people getting the buff, while the remaining 3 can be on ad clear. Yes, it is another one of these kinds of fights, and while you can have more than 3 people getting Glyph Breaker, it is just not really that necessary. However, it is helpful to know what to do as an ad clear player in case something goes wrong, which often does. Let's talk about getting the Glyph Breaker buff. You may have seen these hands and symbols and whatnot throughout the raid, and you've been told, or now that I think about it, not told, to dodge and avoid them, but you should have figured that one out. Well, guess what? Now you have to stand in them. There are 2 strategies for handling Glyph Breaker. I'm simply going to tell you the one that my team used. I don't know if it's going to stand the test of time, but here it is. So, each one of these hands that appears actually has a spot on it that's vulnerable, their wrist. You can kind of see this bracelet looking thing on their wrist. However, you can only shoot it if you are in the corresponding attack that it is casting. For example, the hand coming out of the ground is going to be spawning circle. It'll be this little highlighted area on the ground. Stepping into this circle will allow you to shoot the wrist of the hand that links with that particular attack. And the same goes for pyramid and square, which is this super long beam that goes across a chunk of the arena. You can do this incredibly fast though, because the wrist does not require a lot of damage to get what you need out of it. A quick strafe and literally 1 or 2 shots will do. If you stay in the circle, or any of the other attacks for that matter, you will eventually get a resonance from it after a short time. The other 2 hands are pyramid, which comes out of the sky vertically, and cube or hex or box, whatever you want to call it, comes out of the sky horizontally and does a Kamehameha looking attack. Pyramid will target players individually, which tends to make it the more annoying attack to keep track of. The cube does this too, but it's much more forgiving about trying to get into position to deal with it. Essentially, what my team does is assign 1 player to 1 shape. In this example, I'm assigned to pyramid, so my job is to find the pyramid attack, step in it while shooting the pyramid hand's wrist, and if I do that right, the wrist will reveal one of 2 colors, red or yellow, which correspond to the type of resonance I need to go get next. A wrist will never show its own color. In this case, pyramid is green. The wrist is never going to show green if it's the pyramid wrist. The wristband also has the shape of the thing that you need. Red is square, green is triangle, yellow is circle. They are always those, they never change. So shape or color, pick whichever you want to use, it doesn't matter. The other strat involves just people calling out what color the wristband is of all the different hands, and then people getting resonance based on those calls. Again, pick one or the other, whatever works for you. I like to be a bit more organized, so I liked assigning 1 shape to 1 person. Okay, so I've shot the wrist of the pyramid hand, and it is red. This means that in order to obtain the Glyph Breaker buff, I need to shoot the pyramid wrist while I have the hexahedron resonance. I get this by standing in the path of the attack that the hex hand does. This attack will take a few seconds to charge up, and then it'll go off. Circle is probably the easiest to read because a circle will go from top to bottom, and then when it hits the bottom, it goes off. The pyramid attack just looks more intense the longer it's around, and it's sort of the same for the hex beam attack, but the telegraph isn't as intense. The risk comes from getting hit by the actual attack and potentially dying as a result, but you'll get a feel for how risky you can play with more experience in the fight. So, now I have hex resonance, I go back to the pyramid attack, shoot the wrist again, and boom, I have my Glyph Breaker buff ready to go. But the difficulty in getting the Glyph Breaker buff at this stage is in making sure you shoot the wrist fast enough so that you don't overwrite the resonance buff that you just got, which is the one that you need. If you're too slow, you'll have the wrong resonance, and then you'll have to go overwrite that overwrite with the correct resonance again. And guess what? If you take too long between shooting the wrist the first time and the second time, it might despawn and then respawn, which might change the resonance buff you need to get Glyph Breaker from that wrist. Meanwhile, others are also collecting the Glyph Breaker buff through their own means. I like to go in groups of 3 to break glyphs, meaning 3 people would have the buff at the same time. We'd all go to the middle together and shoot all the glyphs on one side of the witness. This will spawn subjugators, but on normal mode, they are simply a means to some kind of power ammo through the use of Aeons, Cenotaph, or whatever you want. The reason we go to the middle is because when you shoot a glyph, it cleanses the resonance debuff away from any player in the middle platform, which is helpful in case your stacks are getting too high, or maybe you accidentally picked up resonance. Resonance is not used for anything else. In between the acquisition of 2 to 5 Glyph Breaker buffs, the witness will test you. In front of the witness will be 14 things. I don't know what these are, but they're things that you can shoot. And you need to make a shape, either a triangle, a circle, it's really a diamond, but it's a circle, or a square. How do you know which shape to make? When this prompt shows up, it will be immediately after someone makes a Glyph Breaker buff. The shape you must make is based on the wrist that the player shot to create the Glyph Breaker buff in that moment. There will also be an audio cue. The hand will scream at you. So just listen to the scream and look to see where it's coming from. Anyway, if I'm shooting the wrist that corresponds with circle, I get Glyph Breaker and the witness calls a test right away, you need to create a circle. Calling out when you get a glyph can be helpful because if 2 people glyph around the same time and you don't pay attention to the scream, you're not going to know which shape you need to make. Now, if you fail the test, you instantly wipe. If you succeed, the witness will send out a wave attack that you must jump over to survive. Don't get fancy here, just jump. Listen for this sound to tell when you need to jump and not anything earlier. Meanwhile, everyone else is just slaying out, grabbing glyph buffs, and breaking glyphs. Once you break all 6, damage starts on the center platform, and this is where it gets intense. The witness will be sending giant wave attacks at you when you're dealing damage, making it so half of the platform is hit with lethal damage if you eat the entire attack. The witness will alternate between left and right, so if their first attack covers the left side of the room, move to the right, and then the next attack is going to be on the right, so you move to the left. He usually does the attack diagonally, so it's more like the front left corner or the back right corner, but everyone should be looking out for these attacks. Do not just rely on callouts. Usually it'll be a side attack, and then the whole platform, which requires a jump. However, sometimes he'll do the entire platform attack very quickly, another time he'll do it pretty slowly, and then another time he just won't do it at all. And which he decides is random, but it'll only happen once per damage phase. So if the first set of attacks has a quick jump needed, it won't be another quick jump until the next damage phase. In between sets of attacks, you'll get a small reprieve to do damage, but you should also be doing damage in between individual attacks if possible. However, the most important thing is staying alive here, even if it means you only do damage in the short reprieve moments. The witness will do 3 sets of these attacks, followed by a 4th final attack after the 3rd reprieve, where he literally just smashes the plate with his hand. Obviously, you should leave before this happens. This process now repeats itself. When it comes to handling Final Stand, this is not a forgiving one. You need good damage in Final Stand. You will not be able to just plink away with a rocket sidearm for the win. It is better to get the witness to close to Final Stand and then do another set of glyphs than it is to try to push for a Final Stand with little to no ammo. You basically get 1 set of attacks from the witness and that's it. He'll go immune after that and it's over. Bring everything you have, make sure you're getting ammo, and come into every damage phase fully prepared. And with that, you have beaten the Witness and Salvation's Edge. Who knows the next time we're getting a new raid, but if this is the last one for a little while, it was certainly an entertaining one. Like the video if it helped. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.